Hi, this is Jordan Teen 1, and today I'm going to show you how to make the new Loophole Bracelet using the Rainbow Loom. I had done this design on the monster tail last week, and I'll show you what it looks like. It has this pretty unique look to it, where the colors run vertically down the bracelet, but they're all interlocked with each other. And then there's also bands inside that weave back and forth to give it this cool design. You want to have your loom set up with the pins in a staggered position so they're not in line with one another, and you want the arrows to be facing you so that all of the opened ends are towards you. You will need about 225 bands to make this bracelet, and today I'll be using black, yellow, and blue. I'm going to start with black, and I'm going to be using that for the center row and also for the bands that are inside, which you really don't see that much. So I'm going to go to the third pin up on the left side of the loom, and the band is going to stretch straight across to the right. It's going to skip that middle row. And then I'm going to that next pin above. Again, it's going over to the right. And now I'm going to the pin above that, and it's stretching straight across. And now I'm taking another black band, and this one is going to go from the second pin up in the center row. It's going to skip over the next two pins and go to the pin above that. And I also wanted to go around those two middle pins on the right hand side. Now I'm going to take the bands on the right and move them across to the left. Just going to pick them up on my hook and move them straight across. Do that for all three. And now I want the bottom rubber bands to come over the top. That's going to make a slip knot. And now I want the bands on the left to move over to the right. But as I'm moving them over, I want to gently just wiggle them back and forth and pull up to make that slip knot nice and tight. Just going to place this on the right here. And I'll do the same thing for the other ones. Just make sure they're nice and tight. And I'm also going to try and keep them in line with the pins because they are movable on this rubber band in the middle there. Do that for the one at the top here. And I'm going to push all of this down. And so I'm going to do one more thing before I start with the colors. I want to add another black band onto these two end bands. So I'm going to take another black, and I'm going to pick this up on my hook on the one closest to me in the middle here, push my hook out to the side, and now I'm going to hook this black band, and I'm going to pull it up through, and then put it back on my hook. So you'll see two rubber bands on there, and I want the bottom one to just go through the top, and then I'm going to pull that nice and tight to make a slip knot. So there'll just be a loop hanging there on the end, and that's fine. I'm going to do the same thing for the other side here. I'll take another black band. I'm going to put my hook down through and push it out to the side, and I'm going to pick up another band here, get the loop, put it back on my hook, and now the one end will slide through the other to make a slip knot. And before I make it tight, I'm just going to slide it around to the back side of that pin, and I'm going to pull that nice and tight to make that slip knot. And so now I'm ready to start with the colors, so I will start with the yellow. And this is going to go from this second pin up in the middle row, and it's going to go diagonally to the right into this middle pin here. And now I'll take my next color, which is blue, and that's going to go from that center pin up to the left, to that center row. And then finally, I want to take a black rubber band, or whatever color you have for your middle. I'm going to put it right on this center pin, but I want it to be doubled. So the way that I like to do it is just place this band on, but leave it in my fingers, twist, and then just put it back on, and then the band will be doubled. If you want to use your hook, what you can do is just place the band on your hook, twist and put it back on. So you'll see the two bands and then you would just place it on the top. So whatever you find easiest to do. And now before I do any of the looping, I want the black bands on these two ends on the right here to switch sides. So I'm taking the bottom one on the right and it's just moving straight over to the left. And now the top one on the right is going to move over as well. And so now I can do the looping process. So for this, I'm going to be reaching down through this cap band, these two black bands on the top. And I'm going to take the bands off in order, so blue is on the top. So I'm just reaching down through, pushing back on the black. I'm going to hook the blue. It's going to come up through, and it's going to go back on itself. And now I'm going to go back down through, push back on the black, and I'm going to pick up this yellow. That's going to come up through, and that's also going to go back on itself. I'm not doing anything with this black band on the bottom for right now. I'm going to push all of this down. And now that I've done that looping, I want the black bands on the left to now move back to the right. So you just have to remember to do that every time. And sometimes it is easy to forget. When you place the bands on, these black bands move over to the left, and then after the looping, they move back to the right. So I'll do the next layer here. So again, I'm starting with yellow, and it's going to go from this middle to the center on the right. And now the blue is going to go from the middle diagonally up to the left here on the end. I'm going to place that cap band in the middle here. So I'm just placing it on, twisting, and putting it back on. Now before I do the looping, these end black bands are going to switch sides. So it's just going to move over to the left. And now I can do the looping. So again, I'm going down inside of these top two black bands, the cap band, getting it behind my hook, and now I'm grabbing the blue band. It's going to come up through and back on itself. And now the same thing again, go down through, and I can bring up the yellow, and again that's coming back on itself here. Just want to make sure they stay in order on the pin. And then finally these black bands can move back to the right. And now that I have two layers on, what I'm going to do is get the black rubber band, this loop that we put on, of the two end pins, and then also the one on the right here in the middle, to come up through the bands that we just placed on. So I'm going to take my hook and I'm going to reach down inside of all of these top black bands. I'm going to get them to go behind my hook. I'm going to grab this bottom black band and I'm going to carefully pull it up through. I'm going to leave this on my hook, push it towards the back, and make sure I have a good hold of it. And now I can pull the rest of these black bands off of that pin. And then this black band that's on my hook will just go right back on that pin. I'm going to do the same thing for the ends. So here I'm going to get my hook to go down through and push back on all of these top yellow bands. It is going to be tight. I'm going to grab a hold of this black loop and pull it up through. And I'm going to leave this on my hook. Make sure you don't let this go. And I'm going to carefully slide the rest of these bands off. And now I can put this back on. And now I'll do the same thing for the other end here. I'm reaching down through all of the blue, and I want to get all of those behind my hook. And now I'm going to reach for this black loop, grab a hold of it, and there we go, pull it up through. I'm going to hold it on my hook, and now I can carefully remove the rest of these. Pull this through here and put it back on. And And you can see that one of my bands came off, but that's okay. I'm just going to put this black one back on here. And I want this to get pushed down. So now I'm ready to start my next layer. So again, it's going to be yellow, going from the end here to the center on the right. And now blue is going from the center on the right up to the top in the middle. Now I'm going to place this doubled band on in the middle. And before I do the looping, I want the bands to move over to the left here. Just these two black bands. And now I can do the looping part. Just going to take them off in order and pull them back on themselves. Push that down, and now these black bands can come back to the right. And as your bracelet starts to grow, if you have a rainbow loom, it's going to work its way out in between the rows of pins. But if you have another brand that has a solid base, you'll have to get the bracelet to grow out in between two pins. So now I'll put on the next layer. And now the doubled band. And now don't forget you have to change positions of the black bands. And now you can do the looping. And now the black bands will move back. And also I want to mention, just be careful when you're doing this looping to try and keep that cap band on this pin. And if, for example, as you're pulling these other bands back on themselves, this pops off, it's not really a huge deal. Just make sure that you get the bands right back on the pin and make sure that they both make it on there, because you don't want to affect the look of the bracelet in the end. So now once again I have 2 layers on, and you can actually put 3 layers on before you pull up these black bands on these 3 pins, but I like to show it with 2 because once you have 3 layers on, the pins are very full and you might have some come off that you don't want to. So again, I'm starting in the center here. I want this bottom black band to come up through all of the black bands on top. So I'm just getting those all behind my hook, and I'm going to grab this black loop. And if it feels really tight, you don't even have to pull it all the way up through, as long as you get this loop up above the pin, and then hold this on with your fingers. Now you can carefully slide the rest of these off, and then put that loop back on. Now I'll do the same thing on the one closest to me here. I'll get all of these yellows to go behind my hook. Grab this black, again, just pull it up far enough so that it's above the pin. I don't want you to force it up because it is tight and your band could snap. So just pull it up far enough and then slide it closer to the back of your hook. Hold it with your fingers, and then you can slide the rest of these off. Don't let this go, and get it back on. And now the same thing on this side. And you're getting this black band to come up. Hold it on there. You can slide the rest of these blue bands off. And now you can carefully put this back on. Again, this one popped off. Make sure that these stay on. And then push this down. Since I do have the rainbow loom, I'm going to have it grow out in between the pins. Now, eventually your black bands are going to start to get too tight and you're going to need to extend them. So I will show you how to do that. I don't feel like mine are too tight just yet, but I will show you what to do when you feel that they are. In order to extend the bands, what you're going to do is, I'll start with this one here. You want to put an additional black band on, stretching it from the right to the left. And now you want to make sure that wherever the bands are, that they stay on that side. So I'm going to take this bottom band here, and I'm going to pull it over the top. And now I want the left side to move over to the right. Put it right on the top here. And now take the bottom band and pull it over. That's going to make a slip knot. And now you can take this band and pull it off here. Pull this nice and tight so the knot gets small. And if your band is kind of short, you want to put the loop back on, but since mine is still pretty long, I'm going to just put it below the loop here, put the original band back on. And now on this one, I'm going to do the same thing when I feel like they're getting too tight. And you'll be able to feel as you're moving these bands back and forth, they'll get shorter and shorter. And when it's too tight, that's when you need to put the extension on. And so you would just place another band from the right to left. And we want this to stay on the right side. So I'm taking this bottom band and pulling it over the top. And now the left side is going to move over to the right. This bottom band will come over the top to make the slip knot. And now you just want to pull this off and make that loop nice and tight and small. And you can put this back on. And now your bands are extended. And you would do the same thing for the ends here. When you feel like those are getting too tight, all you would do is do the same thing that we did at the beginning. You're going to put your hook down through, push it out to the side, grab this black loop and pull it up through, put it back on your hook. You're going to loop the bottom band through the top and pull that nice and tight to make that slip knot. And then the same thing at the top here, you'll take an additional band, go down through, push it out to the side, grab that band, pull it up through, and place it back on. So you'll see the two bands, and pull the one through the other, and pull tight. So that's all you need to do to extend the bands. And depending on what brand of bands you work with, some are a little bit stretchier than others, so you'll just have to judge when you think it's time to add an extension. So now we're going to do the next layer. So again, it's going to be yellow. And then the blue. And now my cap band. Now once you've added the extension bands, they're going to be a lot looser, so they might be a little bit more difficult to work with because you do need to keep the bands tight within the bracelet to make it look nice and even. So you're just going to switch sides with these bands. Now when I have the loop on, I like to just do it with my hands. I find it easier. And you can see I have a lot of rubber band to work with yet, but if it was short, I would be having to put this loop on. And sometimes they want to be tricky and go off on you. And if that is the case, you would just use your fingers to try and hold them in place as you were doing this part. And also when you've added an extension, it's important that you keep these tight within. So as you are moving them back and forth, you just want to pull up to make sure that it's nice and tight within the bracelet, and then pull over. Now I'm going to do the looping here. And now I want these black bands to come back over. So again, I'm going to put it on here below where I made that slip knot, just because I feel like I have a lot of room to work with. So I will just continue in this same pattern, And just remember that you're putting these bands over to the left side when you place the first colored bands on, and then after you do the looping you want them to come back. And when you feel like your bands are getting too tight, you just need to add the extension how I showed you. So I am just going to fast forward here, and when the bracelet gets long enough, I will show you how to remove it from the loom. And just a quick note, it may look a little bit messy as you see your bracelet start to grow, but in the end I'll show you how you can straighten those out to make it look nice and neat. When you have your bracelet to a good length, what I like to do before I actually take it off of the loom is try and straighten it out here. So you can see that it is a little bit messy. I did try and straighten it a little bit at the bottom. The easiest way I've found is to just stretch it out a little bit and then take your hook, take the back of your hook and carefully just go in between and get them to come down, the bands. If there's any bands that are overlapping each other on the edges, you can fix it. Another thing that you can use is a toothpick. That way you don't have to worry about the hook part getting caught. So if you want to just take a couple of minutes and just carefully push these down and straighten them out as you go, you can get it to look a little bit neater. And then as far as the bands in the middle go, sometimes they're a little bit overlapping or twisted, and so you can just take a minute and try and even those out as well. So it just takes a little bit of time to get it to look nice and neat. And as far as removing it from the loom, you should have one rubber band left on all 5 of the pins. And so I'm going to start on the bottom right here. I'm going to take this band and move it to the pin above. And I'm going to take the band on the top here and move it down. Now your bands might be a little bit shorter or a little bit longer depending on when you added your last extension band. Mine are probably about in the middle right now. And now I'm going to take the band on the bottom that's closest to me and move it up. I think that my end bands are actually a little bit tighter than my middle bands, but that's okay. The one at the top is going to move down. And now I want to take the bottom rubber bands and move them over to the top. I'm just going to do one at a time until I have just 2 rubber bands left on the pin here. And now I am going to reach my hook and put it through these 2 bands. Now I can pull this off of the loom. Just going to take this row off so I can pull it out. And if you feel like your bands are still pretty loose at the top because you had longer extensions, you can just take a little bit of extra time to take your hook and just pick up some of the bands that are around and just pull one through the other until you get it nice and tight. Let me just get it through here. And now I'm going to take a clip. I have an S-clip here. You can use whatever clip you have available. And I'm just going to hook it through the one side. And then on the other side, I'm just going to pick up a couple bands on the end and hook the clip through there. And then here is your bracelet. So I have a little bit more fixing to do. It's a little bit messy right now. And then here are some of the other ones that I had previously made. Here's a red, white, and blue. And then this one is fuchsia, white, and teal. I hope that everyone enjoyed making their loophole bracelets. You can always leave me comments on YouTube and Facebook. Post pictures of your creations to my Facebook page. And please feel free to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can stay up to date on all of my latest tutorials. You can also find me on Pinterest and Instagram, so please feel free to subscribe to those as well. Thanks for watching!